Please welcome Mr. Steve Hamm. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, absolute pleasure to be here. Seems that the past 12 months have gone very, very quickly, but it's always a pleasure to be here and see so many individuals, yourselves, coming together in a forum like this, in this particular region, to talk about fire safety in its broadest possible sense and all the elements that go with that. And of course, we're talking about leaders in fire safety, and you know, all of us have a role to play in that leadership context to take forward the agenda of fire safety to try and achieve what we all aim to achieve, which is a fire-safe world where individuals can and businesses and communities can thrive and be safe from the phenomenon that we know as fire. That's no easy task, as we all know, and it keeps us occupied all of the time. And sadly, we still see, don't we, on a global basis and a global situation, we see incidents which either cause significant loss or significant damage, or ultimately significant loss of human life. And we see those examples all the time. The problem of fire knows no boundaries. The politics don't enter to it. It's all about science, and it's a physical and chemical situation in a physical, either man-made or natural environment. And we're dealing with some big issues on this, and that's why, as leaders, it's important that we do take time out to come together and actually think about where the priorities lie and what are the achievable and sensible sort of objectives that we should be focusing on in the moment, in the here and now. So I've got a few minutes here just to introduce what's coming up this afternoon. I will start with following on from Terry about the Institution of Fire Engineers. So I'll just do a very brief sort of introduction to what perhaps the institution can do for you and your organisations as leaders in fire safety. And then I'll just speak very briefly about sort of setting the context for this afternoon's three speakers. So on the IFE, the Institution of Fire Engineers, it's been around a long time, and just like everything else in the world, it's had to evolve. It was formed in 1918, long before Terry or myself were involved with the IFE. It's way, way back. But we are where we are now in 2024. And what the institution is, and what it continues to develop and continues to be, is a professional body. And I emphasize the word professional there. So there are many, many organizations that represent different interests in the fire community. Some are commercial, some are professional, some are government and legislative. All of those exist, and they're entirely legitimate forums. What the IFE is a professional body about individuals and organizations. And what I'm really interested in is that the institution sets the bar for professional standards, professional competence, values-based behaviour in the fire industry, the fire sector. And of course, where we overlap with other important sectors, most notably really construction and the built environment. So that's what we're about. And the IFE, if you haven't looked at the IFE, then please do use the QR code that's out there on the banner and have a look about what the IFE is all about, what it could do for you. If you're an individual, think about it as recognising your achievement, recognising your professional credentials, and being able to put yourself on a benchmark with other fire professionals. That's what the institution does for you as an individual. For those of you thinking about it from an organisational perspective, think about what it does for your corporate risk profile. Having a workforce, an organisation affiliated and engaged with a professional body is a huge indicator of good practice and can come into play, particularly when activities are scrutinised. We've seen in the UK, in the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower incident, organisations being scrutinised in a very public way. And many of those have been left a little bit exposed because there's not a third-party involvement to attest to people's credentials and the organisation's credentials. So either as an individual or as an organisation, please do think about the IFE. You've got a very active branch here in this area with the GCC branch. So please do have a look at that. Okay, just a couple of words now then on the context that we're in, and that will lead into this afternoon's speakers. So this afternoon you're going to be really focusing on three very discrete but interconnected areas, really. The first of which is to do with communications, and crisis communications particularly, and how we manage ourselves and how we lead in a community when crisis occurs. So I'll talk about that briefly. Another discrete but very, very important area is around diversity, and I'll touch on that in a moment, because it's not the political sense of diversity that we want to talk about. It's what I would call operational diversity, the skills, the diverse skills that we need within this industry to enable us to do what we set out to do. And then finally, there's another discrete but very important area, which is emerging operational risks. And there are a number of drivers for that, most notably driven through the sort of global situation that we find ourselves in, where we're looking for alternative fuel sources and energy storage systems, different methods of construction, that type of thing. So, first of all, crisis communication. There's a few sort of bullet points up there, but the top one really is something, I don't want to steal the thunder of the speakers, but it really is the difference between the resolution of something in a swift and timely manner, or a degree of chaos. And it's always been the case. Anyone who's been involved in emergency response over the years will be familiar with the fact that getting information out when an incident occurs is absolutely pivotal to success, because people are curious and people have questions, particularly if they've got either an emotional or sort of legitimate interest in whatever the incident is. And of course, that's changed incredibly in the era of social media, because that information and that messaging is dynamic. It occurs in real time when the incident occurs. So any type of crisis communication strategy now is something that really has to be thought through properly, and you need to be dynamic, and we need to be agile with all of this. There's a couple of other bullet points up there really around some of the obvious things about transparency, compassion, and be authentic. We need to be authentic when we're communicating and talking. So I'm sure this afternoon's speaker will go into that sort of in more detail. But the most important thing really with crisis comms is that last bullet point there. It's up to us as leaders. When fires occur, we do an awful lot of our work in the pre-fire phase, don't we, and an awful lot in the post-fire phase. But when it occurs, in the heat of the moment, literally, it's about inspiring confidence and trust, and really demonstrate our true credentials as leaders, because community trust and government level trust and confidence in us as fire professionals is absolutely paramount. So that's the first one that you're going to be looking at this afternoon. This is totally different, but I use the phrase operational diversity because I think that's a very good way of sort of summing up what we're trying to talk about here. So as it says up there on the screen, this really is a fundamental pillar, really, of resilience, which is what we're trying to achieve. Fire plays its part in the wider resilience of communities. But to do that and have our resilience inbuilt requires the broadest possible range of skills, attitudes, cultures, knowledge, behaviours. All of those things come together, and it's quite often politicised, particularly in sort of where in the UK at home and elsewhere. It's politicised around gender. It's politicised around sort of race and things of that nature. We really need to delve beyond that and think about operational diversity. It's not about prejudice. It's not about anything other than ensuring that we in the fire industry have the best possible blend of individuals globally to address the fire problem. And it strengthens the profession. The more individuals that we can have from a very diverse range of backgrounds with different thoughts, different ways of looking at the same problem, has to be beneficial to us. It's not unique to fire. I think that's a societal fact that we just shouldn't ignore. And traditionally, emergency response has been dominated by certain demographics and things of that nature. But for us as leaders, to try and inspire everybody who has something to contribute really to the fire agenda is absolutely pivotal. And then the final thing is one of the most important things, I think, to me, currently doing this role as CEO of the IFE, is what's going on out there in the world, outside of this building. And what does it mean for operations and emergency response particularly? And there are 3 examples up there on the slide that sort of sum it up really. So energy storage, alternative ways of storing energy, in particular batteries and lithium ion. I'm sure we're all aware of the significant challenges that that situation is causing for us, be it in storage, be it in transit, or be it in building design with battery sort of vehicles included in the planning and things of that nature. And of course, fire extinguishment and dealing with incidents involving lithium ion is pretty tricky. So we need to keep ahead of the curve on what's going on there, and that's why we need to think about the emerging operational risks. And the final one is the buildings. There's an illustration there, a green building. Literally a green building. Very, very good, positive, and worthwhile rationale behind why we might want to have a green building for various agendas, but what about the fire safety challenges that presents? Alternative methods of construction, particularly the use of timber, as we all know, is a growing phenomenon. If we look at the city we're in here, most of what's out there is traditionally concrete, steel, glass, but as we go forward, in 10, 20, 30 years, what's the ratio going to be like of alternative building materials as cities like this continue to grow and thrive? That all gives us challenges to keep us busy and occupied. So on that note, I will conclude this sort of keynote and hope that the 3 speakers, hopefully I've set the context for what you're going to hear next. And thank you very much. I look forward to speaking to as many of you as I can later on today. Thank you.